So a bit of a scramble drill here. Bleav in Chargers on a Saturday morning prior to the Raider contest. Week 18 as the Chargers going to wrap up the regular season. And unfortunately, we're doing this prior to knowing how they're going to play this one. But for those of you that can't quite follow along, I'm sure you all know, if you're listening to this, you're well-versed in what's happening. And Bengals knock off the Steelers. Chargers going to play everyone and try to get that 5 seed. They'll jump up a spot. They'll play the Texans in the wild card round and have an opportunity to maybe not go to the number 1 seed, to maybe even host a playoff game if things work out behind them, with the Steelers as the 6 seed, with the Broncos or the Bengals or the Dolphins as the 7 seed. If the Steelers win, then, I'm guessing we're going to see a lot of guys rested and treat this as a bye week, because the Ravens have no choice. They are going to have to win the game against the Browns, not knowing what's going to happen with the Steelers-Bengals, as the AFC North is still up for grabs. So Jim Schwartz, you know him. He's crazy as freaking all get out. So he's going to send Myles Garrett in that front, and they're going to beat the snot out of that team as best they can before it gets away from them.
Oh, without a doubt. You know that Jim Schwartz had him. He was my coach there in Tennessee with the Titans. He's going to go after it. This guy plays, so he wants to be a head coach. You know, still have admirations to be a head coach. He's going to have those Cleveland Browns team humming. You know, defensively, they're going to hit you. They're going to beat you up. That is going to wear a lot of Baltimore guys out. And Baltimore has to win. They don't know the outcome of the game. They're going to go and play this like a playoff game. This is what it is. They're playing for a seed to be, the higher ranking. Yeah. So I think it's great that that we can sit back and watch this physical game today with the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, I think that the key there is that it works either way. Look,
right.
Would you rather go to Houston? Yes. Would you rather be the 5 seed? Obviously. There's a chance that the Steelers win a playoff game, and maybe even the Broncos or the Bengals, especially if the Bengals get in. We know how dangerous that offense can be, and that's kind of what Coach Harbaugh talked about is, look, 11 wins sounds a lot better than 10, and being the 5 seed sounds a lot better than being the 6. Now, the difference is, if you are the 6, you get an opportunity. That's where don't be too freaked out and upset, like, it kind of messed up the path, because there is value, and you can speak to it better than I can, Lo. There is value to being able to rest Herbert and Derwin and Joey and Khalil. However he wants to play it, they have an opportunity to give these guys rest and go in to a Baltimore, to go to Baltimore to face a team that had to play what's likely a pretty physical contest in a cold weather situation, and have maybe just a slight, bit, even though it's not an edge because you're playing on the road in Baltimore, but you do at least have some little benefit because of the way the schedule is played out.
Well, no question. And we saw Monday night, you saw a very, very competitive game, a 49er team that's all but out of the playoffs and don't have really a chance. But you saw the way that Dan Campbell approached that game. That game was still in the ballot. It was a 4-quarter game. Niners pushed them. And now you have to realize you have a team that can be the number 1 seed, can drop all the way down to the 5th seed. Man, isn't that just horrible? When you watch where the Detroit Lions and Minnesota Vikings, this game is, for the honor to be the number 1 seed in the NFC. It's too bad that you just don't go by power rankings, because if that was the case, that'd be 1 and 2. So like you just alluded to, as I bring it full circle, this is a very big game. And you've seen the way Detroit played that. They said, hey, we got to play these guys, because they wanted to make sure that, hey, look, not just the 1 seed, but you play for pride. And I think that's the way Harbaugh's looking at this game, too. It's like, look, I would love to be in that 5th seed. I'd love to, if Pittsburgh were to lose that game and, Cincinnati Bengals win that. Yes, it makes our path a lot easier. But, hey, look, we understand we still have a job to do. If they don't, hey, look, if you're going to be that 6 seed, you rest the guys. Harbaugh's a smart guy. He will pull these guys. He will let guys with the games in the ballot and know that the Steelers won that game. Harbaugh's not going to play these guys. He wants to rest, and that's an edge too. So either way, like you said, don't be upset, Charger fans. Whatever happens, I think this team's in good place.
Yeah, look, I'd love to see the Bengals win. Love to see the Chargers have an opportunity to get that 5 seed, to travel to Houston, to take on a team that just got throttled 31-2 by the Ravens, that is down Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell, and their starting stretch. Jimmy Ward is out. Their nickelback is out. Their offensive line has played terribly all season long. It's a team that's searching, and a team that, even though they're locked into the 4 seed, D'Amico Ryan just said, we're playing, man. We got to figure some stuff out. So those guys are going to play this week against Tennessee and try to right the ship a little bit after losing 2 in a row, especially losing 31-2 to the Ravens on Christmas Day. So they're going to play some guys. It'll be interesting, because you hear about how tight-knit this group is of the Chargers, and we got 3 guys with incentives, Lo. We got $250K on the line for Bud Dupree if he can get 1 sack. We got $150,000 on the line for J.K. Dobbins if he can get 58 rushing yards, and we got $125,000 on the line for Christian Fulton if he can get an interception. So I'd love to get your insight on how those things work out when you got one game left and you're looking at that kind of scratch for what are certainly some attainable numbers.
Oh my goodness, that's some good scratch. That's a great post-Christmas bonus. I mean, the New Year's, Christmas is over, but hey, look, who cares? Let me get that 250. Don't think the guys haven't even counted it. And that's the way, I'm telling you, I remember playing down there with us with the Saints, and Jim Everett was our quarterback, and I needed 40 passes. Believe it or not, the big fella needed like 40 passes. I get 25,000 if I caught 20 passes, went up increment of 10,000. So I only needed like 3. So I already knew I had some of the money. So I was just like,
right,
I want to spend, and the money's you're already thinking, I'm going to reach this thing. The week before, right? I'm playing with Jim Everett, quarterback. Monday night, you know what I do? I bring a case of beer, drive out to where he's staying, and we freaking sit there and ham it, and we have a drink, some beers. We're watching games. I said, Jim, I just need 5 more. Jim was checked down, Charlie. He was throwing me the ball. So absolutely money, without a doubt.
Yeah.
1,000%. Those
Love
incentives go a long ways, man. So, guys are going to be fired again.
It'll be interesting, too, because if the Steelers win, I'm anxious to see how Coach wants to play it with J.K., who obviously is just coming off of an injury. We know how important he is to this team. I want him to get that $150,000 because he took a veteran's minimum, contract. So that's a lot of money for him. But at the same time, it's like, hey, man, it's the playoffs next week. There's nothing we can gain out of this. 58 yards means I'm going to have to give you, handful of carries now. And
right.
I kind of want to rest, Slater and Alt, give those guys a break. And that's what will be interesting. If the Steelers win, how Coach wants to play this.
He rests them. He doesn't play them. And I'm going to tell you right now, knowing the Spanos and knowing Harbaugh, he's like, hey, guys, look, what do you guys want? These guys could have possibly got this if the Steelers win. I think it's already a foregone conclusion. I think they pay him the money. If it's that 58 yards and he needs 1 sack, I just think, do you play around with your guys to make guys unhappy?
Right. That's what they would do. They would just write out a check and say, we're good.
I think they would. For 58 yards, they're like, that's obtainable. They look at the sack. If you only need only 1 sack, it's like, hey, look, we're going to give you, that 250 is a little much. We're going to give you half. I think that you can make it right and laugh with the guys and make sure and I think that's the kind of team, and that's what Harbaugh would want. That's if the Steelers win. But I don't want the Steelers to win because I want these guys to play with their head on fire.
Exactly
because to go make it happen.
You and me both. Avenge the 63-21 contest from last year on a Thursday night that led to all of these wholesale changes that now have Coach Harbaugh and Joe Ortiz running the ship and certainly righting the ship as they have a chance to go 11-6 on the season. Look, that's how perhaps, Dean and John and AG Spanos will deal with their money situation. How do you deal with yours? With Bet Online, the world's most trusting betting platform and your number one source for online betting. The earliest odds, in-game live betting. Bet Online provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. It's the largest selection of odds on everything from football to the NBA to college basketball, NHL, even UFC. Head over to Bet Online today. Don't forget to use the promo code Bleav. That's BLEAV, BLEAV. You get a welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, the game starts here. Baltimore beat the Chargers week 12, 30-23. Derrick Henry had 140 rush yards. And I think of all the teams above them, Lo, if you asked me to pick which do I think is the best matchup, it's the Texans. Which do I think would be the toughest matchup? It'd be the Ravens. I think I would put the Ravens ahead of the Bills, even though Josh Allen is playing at a psychotic level right now, and what the threat that he is with his legs, the physicality he plays with, and even the 15-1 could be 16-1 Chiefs. I think as far as just the way they match up, the way the Ravens run the football, that's the one that I look at and I'm like, okay, that'd probably be the toughest one, which is why I'd probably want to get it out of the way first. When you got a little bit of rest, you're as healthy as you could possibly be going into the playoffs, and that's sort of the consolation prize if the Steelers win, the way I look at it. Does that make sense to you, or am I reading that thing wrong?
No, I think you're reading it spot on. You look at the Ravens, that score wasn't as bad as you think, and that game was a lot closer than what people realize. You have to realize they went for it. The Ravens went for it on what, 4 times on fourth down,
Yeah.
because they knew the game. It was a shootout. So you look at the Chargers and you look at the way that they played that game. You gave them an extra down. They had to use all their downs to even be able to score. 2 of those fourth down, 3 of those led to scores. So you think about it the way you're thinking. I think it's absolutely right. If you're in 4th and 3 or 4th and 4, the biggest thing with the Chargers, when you the Ravens, we'll get into that. Hopefully, won't be talking about it because the Steelers
Right.
lose. But if you do play them, it's important on 3rd down that you keep those guys. If it is 4th down, that it's 4th and 2 or longer. Can't be 4th and 1, because younger brothers, going to say, "We're going for it. We're going to absolutely go for it." So that is the key with Baltimore, because they'll line up and they're not afraid to run it on 4th and 1.
Yeah, and I think certainly the Chargers, the defense has played exceptional football. They've held teams to 7 or less points in 12 games. If they do it in the 13th, they'll have an opportunity to tie the NFL record with Coach Harbaugh in his 2011 49ers did it 13 times. That's how good this defense has been. But I think if you were to circle one thing that has given them a little bit of an issue, it's a
Sure.
dominant run game.
Yeah.
And I don't think when you look at the remainder of the when you look at the AFC playoffs, who has the most dominant run game? And it's arguably the most dominant run game in football, with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson as a dual threat out of that backfield. Because you can't not be on your heels with Lamar Jackson back there. You just can't. It's that the guy has an opportunity to go 70 yards every time he decides to take off. And when you combine that with the power of Derrick Henry, it's just so hard to get downhill to
Right.
make sure you meet
Right.
him before he gets his runway. Just that combo of those two is so freaking hard. It's a tough combination to figure out.
It's almost virtually impossible when you think about it, because of the fact, you look at Saquon Barkley. Here's a guy who probably will get the rushing title. Depends on what happens if they decide to play him. But he's more electrifying. This guy can run. He's faster. He's got more moves. But now you have Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. That's a combination of this guy. But now you can spread them out. They're like the Wonder
Right.
Pen powers activate, form of lightning, form of thunder. You
Thunder.
remember that show back in
Oh,
the
yeah.
day, right?
Oh,
I
yeah.
pulled one out for you, money. So that's how those two are, because Lamar Jackson, he's comparable to the running back Saquon, the jukes, the moves, and you have Derrick Henry's way more physical.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Lo, it's worth. Let's just say they have to play this one. Let's say the Steelers win and the Chargers have to play this one against the Raiders. What are they walking into? You're walking into a team that's playing some pretty good football right now. Last week their defense had 2 forced fumbles, had 2 interceptions, had 4 sacks, had 7 quarterback hits. And in the last 3 weeks, they have the 5th highest pressure rate in football, 39%, even without Max Crosby. Now, a lot of that is opponent. The one thing they don't do well is tackle. They have converted just 55% of their first tackle opportunities. That's the 6th lowest number in the NFL. So what I'm getting at is the benefit of playing this team maybe is an opportunity to extend 6 quarters to 10 quarters of dominant football. We know that offensive line has been leaky. We know that this Chargers defense has been humming the last 6 quarters. They've allowed just 13 points over 6 quarters, and 3 of them were sort of sacrificial points by the Broncos to kick that early field goal in an effort to try to get an onside kick while they were still pretty far outside the red zone. So there is even more of a positive than just getting the 5 seed. I do think there is something to be said about being that proverbial team that nobody wants to face. If you can do to the Raiders what you did to the Broncos in the second half and what you did to the Patriots for 4 quarters, you put together another 4 quarters that looks like that, and you're going to be talking about a team that people are going to be looking at saying, all right, physical. They got a dominant offensive line with J.K. Dobbins behind it now that's running the football effectively again. Ladd McConkey has emerged as a legitimate number 1 receiver in this league that you absolutely have to commit resources to. If you don't, he will torch you like they did in New England when they chose not to have Christian Gonzalez shadow him. And Ladd just totally torched that team. So there is that benefit of just more film, more Derius Davis, more Ladd McConkey, more Hassan Haskins, who's been playing really well on film for teams to have to think about. How are we to me, the emergence of Derius Davis is going to do, I think is going to have an impact beyond what we've seen on the field in the playoffs, because he's a 4-2 guy. And when you see a 4-2 guy get behind a defense on 2 separate occasions in 2 weeks, you're going to be like, hey, man, you can't let this guy get behind you. And now you got to worry about that. Worry about him taking the top off the defense.
And you got to worry about him on kickoff return. So when you see what he's been able to do on offense the last several weeks, it makes the teams have to say reconsider. I think when you look at the playoffs, of course, we look at Kansas City and you think, okay, Bentonville, and then you have the Bills. But if you say what teams they don't want to see that's coming, it's not Denver. Everyone said, give me Denver. Everyone's like, line up in line. Let me take Denver. Let me take on the Houston Texans. There's 2 teams right now. When you're talking about the AFC, the way that they're cooking, I think offensively, you don't want to see Cincinnati. Collectively, as a team that's getting in the playoffs, that you don't want to see, because offensively and defensively, just as a whole team concept, it's the Chargers. Cincinnati's offense is on fire. You just say, man, that's going to be a tough out. But when you look at the Chargers, saying, why not the Chargers, though? Because as a team, you defensively, offensively, they're more solid than Cincinnati. So I'm telling you, these teams are saying, I don't want to see the Chargers either.
Yeah, and I think, the other thing that goes into that Raider game is just running the ball. Prior to last week, they were averaging under 77 yards per game running the ball without JK back there. Teams were, they weren't concerned with the rush attack at all. They were committing resources. And I shouldn't say it that way. They were blitzing a lot. And we saw the Patriots do it, right? So the Patriots were blitzing a lot and they were playing man, and Herbert made them pay for it, right?
Yeah.
And we saw a lot of teams do that, and the numbers versus zone versus man were skewed dramatically in favor of Herbert cutting teams up in zone because his guys maybe weren't getting freed up on man, but that's changed. I know Josh Palmer's going to be out for this one, but Derius Davis, like we talked about, Quentin's come along quite a bit now throughout the course of the season, and we know Ladd he's a man beater. It doesn't matter. Like, he's got the second best numbers in the league out of the slot behind CeeDee Lamb. That's the only guy that's been better than him in the slot this season. Arguably one of the 3 best receivers in the league, and then Ladd in the slot. That's how good he's been. We've seen the emergence of Stone Smart now. In, catching the ball down the field in the seam and playing that tight end position where you can't cover him with a linebacker and a safety's too small. Now you've got that's emerged. But to me, the biggest one and what they might be able to take advantage of against the Raiders, just to put another 4 quarters on film, is that rush attack. Last week, 147 rush yards after averaging just 77 in the 4 games prior to that. So that's the big one. If the Bengals are able to win, and they do have to play, getting Dobbins, Edwards is out of this one, but getting Dobbins, getting Vidal, and getting Hassan Haskins to, again, punish teams with the run. It is clear, by the way, this offensive line wants to go forward. As good as the tackles are at protecting Herbert, the interior of that line, with Jamari Sawyer in there last week, second time we've seen Sawyer in a game for a game in place of an injured Trey, and the second time we've seen this rush attack look that they're the 2 best performances we've seen this season. There is something about Jamari in there, Low, and he's a squattier guy. He's a thicker guy, and they want to go forward, man. They don't want to go back.
That's one thing that we have not talked about much. That offensive line has been protecting Herbert. They have done a great job of keeping him upright. The time that he has, if you give Herbert time, I'm telling you, he is very, very efficient and very, very just amazing when he has time to throw the ball, and he's got a clean pocket. This guy has a cannon for an arm, and he is very, very accurate. So the offensive line's been doing great. The reason why I want the Chargers to play is because if you do see Kansas City, I think this tight end that the Raiders have, I want to see Derwin James, how he handles the tight end, because I think this tight end for the Raiders, he's an up-and-coming star. Bowers is a superstar. This guy can
broken
play.
Every record. He's broken. He leads all tight ends in receiving yards. Not rookies, all tight ends. He broke Puka Nakua's receiving yards record. He broke the tight end record he broke Mike Ditka's record for most receptions and receiving yards by a tight end in a rookie season. It's been around since 1961.
Wow.
And he broke that. Like, that's how dominant he's been. I can't tell you how happy I am with the way this season has gone for Derwin. After the last couple years, the way the prior regime chose to use him, playing him high, moving him all over the field. This, Jesse Minter and Coach Harbaugh, God love him for just saying, hey, man, I don't ever want to see Derwin James too far from the ball. Let's just, wherever the ball is, he's got to be close to it. And he's been, let me see what the numbers are. I got it here.
He's all over the
Only
field.
he is only one of two players in the NFL to play 10% of snaps on the line of scrimmage as a slot corner, safety, and linebacker, 10% each of his snaps as a safety on the line of scrimmage. He's been that big nickel. That, to me, the big nickel is where he has really managed to shine. Like, that's because, like you said, you can keep him there. If you want to put him on the tight end, put him on the tight end. If you want him to jam the slot receiver and just knock him on his ass, you can do that. And if you want him to just jump and get right after the quarterback, he's been so good. He's back to being regarded as what I Bleav he deserves to be regarded as, and that's one of the best safeties in football, which is why he made the Pro Bowl, as one of the two safeties.
Oh yeah, he is, and that's what I love, and that's what I want to see. This matchup, because he jumps everything. I watch the guy when he sees it run away from him. The way that his get off, when his anticipation and how he scrapes. A lot of safeties, they'll go up the field and they're chasing from behind. He's so tight right down the line. He's able to initiate contact and make tackles in the backfield when they get 1 yard down the field. He cuts and plays so in your face. He's just an aggressive, physical guy, and he can handle the big guys. I mean, he's taking on linemen, he's taking on backs. I mean, Derwin James, like you said, he's a nail. He's the nail of that defense.
Exactly. I mean, it's a magnifier, right? I should say it's a multiplier. When Derwin plays well, it is an absolute multiplier for the rest of the defense and how well they play. He is the straw that stirs the drink. They follow his lead, and they follow his lead, off the field as an emotional leader, as the guy that sets the tone. But when he's playing at this level like he has, there's a reason why the Chargers have a very good opportunity to be the number one scoring defense when it's all said and done at the end of the regular season for the first time in the history of the franchise during the Super Bowl era. They did it in 61 and 63 when it was the AFC only, and they won an AFC champion. They made the AFC championship game in 61, and then they won the AFC championship in 63 when they had the number one scoring defense. Last year, number one scoring defense in NCAA was University of Michigan. They win the national championship. It is not something to be taken lightly. You can't talk it off by saying, oh, what about opponents and what quarterbacks did they face? And how about when they played the Ravens or when they played the Bengals? No, it is a 17-game sample, and nobody allowed fewer points. And then when you just factor in the 7 points in first halves 12 separate times, like the 10 points or more in the first half, I think only 3 times. Like, that's how dominant this team has been all season. And, Lo, when we look at it and you talk about what the potential opportunity is, like, you look at the Texans, and it's a team, I'm trying to find it right now because I know, so the Chargers are, where is it? If they're undefeated, if they allow 17 or fewer points, undefeated, right? Right now, the Texans are clocking in at 21.6 points per game. I mean, to me, that's enough. That's enough of a variance to be pretty darn close. When you get it to the top, you're talking about the Ravens at 30, the Bills at 32. Like, that's obviously going to be a much bigger challenge. But when you have a potential first-round matchup where you're talking about a team that's averaging just 22 points per game, that's right there in the last. And here's what it's looked like the last 4 weeks: 23, 20, 19, and 2. That's what they've scored. So it's right there in that wheelhouse for this defense to be able to give the offense an opportunity. I mean, look, we're doing this thing late. We're looking forward a lot. I'm sure Coach Harbaugh would absolutely hate it because we're kind of skipping over the Raider game. We're counting maybe a win by the Bengals. We're just trying to lay everything out for you on a Saturday to get you ready for this contest that kicks off at 1:25 on Sunday.
Well, I can't wait till it happens. And I think we're being a little jumping ahead because it's already here. We're just doing a little late. But I think if you look at the way that the Cincinnati Bengals is playing and the Steelers are reeling, you see the arguing coming out of there. You're reading the paper. They're in a situation. They're reeling. They can't score. They can't stop the run. The defense seems like they just kind of wore down, and they just offensively, they just can't put it together. So this is a game now. When you look at the way Cincinnati's playing, everyone's talking about Joe Burrow's this new MVP guy. You and I have been saying, hey, he's been in this conversation anyway. But you look at Joe Burrows is in the MVP conversation for what he's done. And you win this game. And I think that Joe Burrows is playing for an MVP type of deal to say, if he goes out and he handles the Steelers and they handle them and he puts up the numbers that he's been putting up, I'm telling you, hold Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, It's not a foregone conclusion. So I think there's a lot of things that we're putting in perspective because of what the environment, the way it's feeling right now in the football world. So, and this is a game, you look at the Raiders, Harbaugh's going to do what he wants to do. Yeah. Even if they don't, even if the Steelers do win, I'd be surprised if he played those guys the whole game. He's like, look, guys, we're going to play a half. He might play them a quarter. It's just for time. And let me go do some of those things. So I think that regardless, Harbaugh might play some of the guys, not all the guys, Joey and Khalil. No, you let those guys rest. But if it's on the line and you can improve your seed, without a doubt, Harbaugh's going to play that way, because that is a great way to get that win under your belt, that first playoff win for Ladd and a lot of these rookies, going to Houston, and you be able to play a Houston team that's reeling, a team that you can beat, and you're going to go in there with confidence, and you're playing a team that doesn't have the confidence. What would that do? You win that game. How does that propel you for the next round? Now it's like, okay, the jitter's over, guys. We've been in the playoffs. Who's next?
Right. Look, I think as we wrap this thing up, I think there's two things out of the Chargers' control that you folks should be cheering for. One, obviously, Cincinnati victory gives the Chargers an opportunity to move up a seed, take on the Texans in the first round, and potentially host a playoff game if things get weird in the wild card round. That's number one. Two, Myles Garrett's got 14 sacks. You're rooting for about sacks 15, 16, 17, 18. You're rooting for, just that Jim Schwartz defense to punish the Ravens. The offense is terrible. It's clear they're tanking by playing Dorian Thompson-Robinson instead of Jameis Winston. He does not give them the best. He's been the worst quarterback in football this year, and Jameis is certainly considerably better. So we know what they're doing offensively, but defensively, you better believe that Myles Garrett wants the sack title, that Jim Schwartz wants to try to make things tough for his resume as a head coaching candidate. So that's what we're rooting for. Beat the snot out of Lamar Jackson and the Ravens in the early contest on Saturday, which fires off about 3 hours from when we're doing this podcast. And then let's get the Bengals to try to knock off the Steelers. So the Chargers are playing everybody against the Raiders, humming going into the playoffs as a 5 seed. But sorry we were late. Just a bit of a crazy week with the holiday. Want to make sure we get a preview in there. Lo, we'll do it again early next week and get ready for either the Texans, the Ravens, or the Steelers as a first-round opponent, depending on how this whole thing shakes out.
Sounds great. Can we do one together, Money? Can we pull it down?
Pull it down.
Pull it down.
Pull it down.
Pull it down.
Pull it down. Pull it down. That's what we're doing. All right, everybody. We'll be back next week.